Thank you for joining us today for the Bird and Bird podcast, the IP Symposium Ireland, a podcast looking at some of the latest trends in life sciences and IP in Europe and Ireland. My name is Anne Henry and I am an IP litigator with Bird and Bird here in Dublin. I am delighted to welcome our keynote speaker today, renowned life sciences expert, international patent litigator and author, Trevor Cook, who is going to discuss trends in life sciences over the next 5 years and the likely impact on patent litigation in Europe and Ireland.
Thanks, Anne. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Trevor, I thought it might be helpful before we start into the podcast to provide some background information for our listeners about the life sciences sector in Ireland and just how much it contributes to the Irish economy.
Yes, I think it's worth doing that, as many listeners may not be familiar with just how buoyant the sector is in Ireland. And given so much manufacturing is happening in Ireland, it's a jurisdiction that regularly features in pan-European patent litigation, as pharma products and medical devices are made in Ireland for export.
Agreed. Well, there are a few statistics which tell the story of the life sciences sector in Ireland succinctly. So, Ireland is the third largest exporter globally of pharma medicinal products, a fact not well known outside of Ireland. Exports in the sector represent 42% of Ireland's total exports. There are 90 plus pharma manufacturing plants in Ireland, and 50 plus of those are FDA approved, which is a very significant number. 13 of the top 15 global biopharma corporations and 14 of the top 15 medtech companies have significant operations in Ireland. And the life sciences sector is the highest employer of PhD graduates in Ireland. So it's fair to say it's a huge employer and continues to be a thriving sector.
Yes, those are really impressive figures, Anne, and they certainly came as a surprise to me when I started digging into this. But before I start talking about trends over the next 5 years, it'd also be good if you could give us an update as to where Ireland is with the ratification of the Unified Patent Court Agreement, and as I'll be touching on the Unified Patent Court in what I say.
Yeah, so let me bring everyone up to speed and where matters are at. So in summary, Trevor, the government planned 2 separate referendums this year, one on the family in March and one on the UPC in June. And following the March referendum defeat, the new Taoiseach Simon Harris has decided to postpone the UPC referendum in June and instead to focus on his priorities for the next general election, which must happen by the end of March 2025, so next year. So it's difficult at this stage to predict when the UPC referendum in Ireland will actually be held, but I believe it is fair to say that it's off the political agenda for some time now. So what does that mean? Well, it means that Ireland has not ratified the Unified Patent Court Agreement in a referendum, so the status quo prevails, and together with the likes of the UK, Spain and Poland, we will remain outside the Unified Patent Court for now, and patent litigation disputes in Ireland will continue before the national courts, and in particular before the Commercial Court in Dublin. But of course, the UPC will remain a driving force in terms of patent litigation in Europe as it grows and develops. So, Trevor, given all that background, what do you think are the key life science trends for the future that you see influencing patent litigation in Ireland and Europe?
Well, and I think for this purpose, you can split life sciences into 2 areas, and adopting the terminology of the IDA, biopharma, otherwise medicines, and medtech, better known perhaps to practitioners as medical devices. The 2 sectors face very different challenges and have very different approaches to patent litigation and also to the UPC, and those sort of differences are likely to persist in the short term. Let's take biopharma first. This has by far the highest patent litigation profile, but also faces some of the biggest industry challenges. I mean, I don't think it's hyperbole to suggest that such challenges are existential, at least to the structure of the industry as we know it now. The research-based pharma sector is squeezed inexorably by a combination of steadily decreasing research productivity, the low-hanging fruit has been plucked, and increasing personalisation of medicine. people looking in terms of genetic fingerprints and things like that, which key in with a particularly effective medicine. And so by personalised medicines, that covers orphan medicinal products such as an increasing number of oncology drugs and advanced therapy medicinal products such as gene therapy products, which are now starting to be authorised, or autologous therapies that rely on a patient's own cellular material as a therapeutic vehicle. As to the steadily decreasing research productivity, there's a large body of literature about this, but one can exemplify the problem by a study published late last year of the 16 largest pharma companies, with sales representing over 60% of the prescription pharma market globally over the 20-year period 2001 to 2020. Over this period, each of these companies spent on average $4.4 billion on R&D annually, but launched less than one new drug, 0.78 of a new drug in fact on average, each year. Less than half these companies had an R&D outcome, namely the commercial value of new drug launches, that compensated for their R&D expenditure. Simply put, more and more R&D is producing fewer and fewer new blockbusters. That is, drugs with sales of over $1 billion per annum. And it's only those that can cover the ever-increasing cost of R&D. So this means the traditional model of sustaining ever more costly research with few widely used, not exorbitantly expensive therapies, many of which are in practice effective only in a proportion of the total patient population, is breaking down. There are notable exceptions, such as the glucagon-like peptide-1, GLP-1 receptor agonists, but these are getting to be ever fewer.
Yes, and The Economist actually, this might be of interest to some of our listeners, did a very good industry profile piece in its science and technology section on blockbuster anti-obesity medicines on the 6th of April, and give an overview of what companies are doing what research, and the various companies involved.
Yes, so vast research costs just cannot be sustained by the already breathtaking costs of personalised therapies, because such therapies by their nature treat only an extremely limited market. There are very few patients across which to spread the costs. As a result, in the long term, there won't be blockbusters to fund research. And blockbusters, as they come off patent or regulatory exclusivity, are necessary to sustain the other side of the industry, the generic industry.
Yeah, exactly. So Trevor, how will this impact patent litigation going forward?
Well, I think in the short term, the consequences probably won't be too serious, because patent litigation, at least on generic entry, only occurs at the end of patent and SPC life. And so, for example, at present, we're currently litigating drugs discovered nearly 25 years ago. But this drop in R&D productivity has been a consistent trend over the last 20 years. So I suggest we're not far from starting to feel it. And in terms of where that patent litigation takes place, Big Pharma is unique, I think, in that it's traditionally validated patents in every jurisdiction that it possibly can, including jurisdictions which people in other industries just would never consider. And it's litigated everywhere on generic entry. In Ireland, the only patent litigation that's got to trial in recent years has indeed been in pharma, has concerned generic entry.
Yeah, that's right.
There's also a bit of innovator litigation, but it's rare, and that seems unlikely to change. Although, who knows? It may get more serious as the research-based pharma companies get into more and more difficulty. Current examples are the PCSK9 dispute between Sanofi and Amgen, which started before the entry into force of the UPC, but is now also proceeding in the UPC. and also the mRNA dispute over the COVID vaccines, etc., other applications of the mRNA platform, and that involves multiple parties. That's not yet hit the UPC. But when such litigation does occur, it tends to be often relatively early in patent life. But as for the UPC, the research-based pharma sector has already opted out most of its traditional European bundle patents from the UPC. This is to avoid centralised validity challenges in preparation for generic entry. There has as yet been no small molecule generic entry litigation in the UPC, and the only dispute of which I'm aware is one that's just started involves Novartis and Genentech against Celltrion, and that's in the biosimilars space. So although the research-based companies could, in theory, opt their patents back in so as to enforce them in the UPC, they do risk not being able to do so if, before so doing, those patents have become the subject of national validity challenges. Moreover, opting them back in exposes such companies to the risk of a sort of all the eggs in one basket challenge in the UPC as to validity and or infringement. So I think overall it seems unlikely that there'll be much, if any, UPC litigation concerning generics before the transitional period during which such opt-out is possible expires at the end of May 2031. That's 7 years after the UPC started. I might add that although the UPC agreement allows for this period during which the opt-out is possible to be extended by a further 7 years, I think most people think it unlikely that that will happen in practice.
Yeah, that's correct. Trevor, it is quite a different picture when you look at the medtech sector, isn't that correct?
Yes. Medtech is a somewhat lower patent litigation profile, at least currently in Ireland, and it faces fewer industry-wide challenges, but it presents a lot of patent litigation opportunities in the coming years, and there is actually quite a lot of patent litigation already ongoing in other national jurisdictions in Europe, and in particular in the UPC. And as a sector, it doesn't, I think, face so many challenges, and certainly its whole business model isn't under threat as in the case of biopharma. And indeed, insofar as there are challenges, I'd suggest they're probably not of direct relevance to patent litigation. Certainly, I think in medtech, in Europe at least, one looming challenge is provided by the new regulatory framework, which is gradually coming into force under the medical devices regulation and the in vitro medical devices regulation. These increase the regulatory overhead for medtech in the EU considerably. I think it's fair to say that previously the EU was seen by US medtech companies, especially the smaller ones, the startups, as a more attractive jurisdiction than the USA in which to introduce medical devices, given what used to be the fairly permissive EU regulatory framework under the old medical device directives. This is no longer the case, and indeed it's possible that some existing medical devices may be withdrawn in the EU because the increased compliance costs may make them uneconomic in the future. And there's another regulatory challenge for medtech, that of regulating software, including artificial intelligence, as a medical device. That'll have the consequence of bringing many companies that we don't traditionally think of as medical device companies under the same regulatory framework as such companies. And there are companies that may not even realize that they should be within, or they are within such regulatory framework. So that's going to provide some excitement. But going back to patent litigation, as I say, there's always been a substantial body of medtech litigation in major national jurisdictions, such as Germany and the UK. Remember the coronary stent wars back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And such litigation can often happen quite early in patent life. But as I also said, a notable feature of the UPC that in its first year it's seeing multiple proceedings in medtech. There's the Dexcom Abbott dispute concerning glucose monitoring. the Edwards-Merrill dispute concerning heart valves, the 10 times genomics dispute with NanoString concerning assays. There's no reason for this not to continue. And perhaps as a little aside, I might point out that our colleagues in Bird and Bird are involved in all three of those actions, actually.
That's right.
And another reason going forward for the UPC to see a lot of medical device litigation is that when you look at the statistics published by the European Patent Office for who is designating unitary patents, and this is the new sort of unitary patent, not traditional bundle patents. And as these unitary patents, no opt-out is possible, and they must be litigated in the UPC. Well, in the top 20 applicants, you've got Johnson & Johnson, Becton Dickinson, Philips, and Roche. And indeed, Johnson & Johnson leads everyone in any technology whatsoever, including tech, ITC sector, where they have lots more patents than in other sectors. And so you've got 4 medical device companies there really showing confidence in the unitary patent and committing themselves accordingly to using the UPC.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. And a trend I think we weren't able to foretell before the UPC got up and running. Well, thank you very much, Trevor, for that fascinating walkthrough. We can see the challenges biopharma is facing given the move away from blockbuster drugs towards more personalised medicines, and how the cost-benefit analysis will likely negatively impact patent litigation suits in Europe in that sector. Likewise, you can see how the medtech sector is a major designator of unitary patents, and so we can expect patent litigation in the UPC in this area in the years ahead. We lightly touched on the regulation of software, including AI as a medical device. And as AI gets the last word on everything these days, and perhaps we should dedicate a future podcast to AI and life sciences. But do you think this is an area that will attract a lot more attention from lawmakers, I guess, in the short term?
Oh, yes. Well, I think AI has already attracted a lot of legislative attention, Anne. And you in Ireland, as a member state of the EU, will shortly have the pleasure of implementing the new EU Artificial Intelligence Act. And that runs to 180 recitals and over 100 articles. And that's before you get down into the implementing regulations, which I'm sure will follow in due course.
Exactly.
But that act has nothing specific to say about IP, except for some provisions that mandate compliance with copyright law. And whilst AI does present many challenges to the patent system, not, I'd suggest, the ones which have been litigated so far about in some jurisdictions, including the UK, such as whether AI can be an inventor. But I'd suggest more issues such as the extent to which the notional skilled person can be deemed to be making use of AI. I tend to think that such matters are probably best thrashed out in the courts, where they can adopt a rather more nuanced approach to such things, as I think legislation can be a rather blunt tool sometimes.
Yes, agreed. And yes, a fascinating issue that is likely to come before the courts in due course. And on that note, I think we're out of time. So thank you, Trevor, today for your insights. And finally, can I wish you and all our listeners a happy World Intellectual Property Day, which falls this week. And thank you all for joining us.